Good morning, boys and girls. Happy Friday. Today is your day 30 of NTI. Congratulations. You're rock stars. I hope you enjoy your weekend. But first, a little video here just to remind you about Module 4 review, multiplying and dividing decimals. Okay? And so I wrote that when you're multiplying decimals, you can use two different strategies, whichever one you prefer. If you're multiplying, you can write the decimals as units, and I'll show you how. Or you can write the decimals as fractions and then turn them back. So there's two different strategies that you can use. So for example, writing as units, this says 4/10. So you could write this as 4/10 times 2. And if you focus on multiplying the whole numbers, 4 times 2 is 8, and you would still have the tenths. And so we could write that back as a decimal. 8/10 is written as 0.8. Or, like I said, you could write them as fractions. And so, for example, you could have 4/10 times 2. And we learned that you can multiply the whole number times the numerator. So that would be 4 times 2. Oops, excuse me. Error on that. So you could do 4 times 2, and your denominator would stay the same. And then you end up with 8/10. And that's exactly what we got right here. So when you have tenths, hundredths, or thousands as your denominator, you can write it back as a decimal. So we got the same answer. So really today it's going to be your preference, whether you want to write your decimals in unit form and multiply whole numbers or divide whole numbers pretty much, or if you want to write them as fractions and multiply and divide. So on this one, I'm going to, since I know these in my head, I'm going to keep these very simple. I'm going to say I'm going to write them as units. 4/10 times 2/10. And I'm going to focus on my whole numbers. 4 times 2 equals 8. Oops. And then tenths times tenths, just like 10 times 10 equals 100. Tenths times tenths equals hundredths. And now I want to write that back as a decimal. So I would write 800ths. Okay? And now down here on this one, I can do the exact same thing. I can write it as a fraction, or I can just keep them as units and multiply whole numbers. I prefer to keep them. I like to write the division ones as fractions and write the Adam, can you hit that light switch for me, please? My laptop's dying. Thank you. Or I like to write the division as fractions, and I like to write the multiplication as units. So I'm just going to keep going. But if you want to pause the video and solve these two, you can. I'm going to write them as units. And so right here I have 8 3/10. But when I write it as units, I actually want to write it as 83/10 times 12. And then what I'm going to have to do is, remember, I'm focusing on multiplying whole numbers. So I'm going to go to the side, and I need to multiply 83 times 12. And again, if I wrote this as fractions, I would still have to multiply 83 times 12. So either way, I'm still going to have to multiply 83 times 12 in some way, shape, or form. So 2 times 3 is 6. Right now I'm focusing on 83 times 2. And 2 times 8 is 16. So I'm done multiplying by the ones place. So now I'm going to multiply 83 times the 1 in the tens place. And remember, this is 83 times 10, not 83 times 1. So that's why where that 0 comes from, a placeholder. And now we're ready. 1 times 3 is 3, and 1 times 8 is 8. And now we're going to add. 6 plus 0 is 6. 6 plus 3 is 9, and 8 plus 1 is 9. Okay, so I end up with 996, and I only have tenths still, so tenths. Now, remember, we want to end by writing that back as a decimal. So 996 tenths would put the digit 6 in the tenths place, so I would end up with 99 and 6 tenths. Okay, so again, you can pause, and I know you had you solve both of them, but if you only solved one, go ahead and pause and try to do the same thing there. So I'm going to keep writing them as units. I just feel like it's a little bit quicker than rewriting them as fractions, but it's totally up to you. You do the same thing. 21, I have 21 and 4/10. Remember, I just want to write as units, so I'm going to put 214 tenths times 5/10. And then of course, what I need to do, that's right, I need to multiply by whole numbers. So I'm going to go over to the side, and I'm going to multiply 214 times, oops, sorry about that, 5. All right, so 5 times 4 is 20. 5 times 1 is 5, plus 2 is 7, and 5 times 2 is 10. Sorry, that looks like a 7 there. I'm going to fix that really quick so we're not getting confused. There we go. All right, so I end up with 1,070. Oops, sorry about that. 1,070, and then we have tenths times tenths, which equals, very good, hundredths. And so I need to write this. So that means that if I have the hundredths, this 0 is going to go in the hundredths place, and my 7 would go in the tenths, which means my decimal would be right there. So I have that answer. And now, if I were you, I probably wouldn't leave it that way. This is equivalent to 10 and 7/10 because this 0 has no value in the hundredths place, so it's actually unnecessary. Unless you were writing a money amount, $10.70, but just a decimal answer would just need to be 10 and 7/10. But either one of those, they're still equivalent, so either one would work. All right, let's hop down to the division. Again, I told you that I really like to write the decimal problems as fractions and divide. I just think it's a little different because it's a little difficult in your mind to divide unit form words. So that's a little bit different. So the only way that you all learned pretty much, well, you could put it in a box, but we're going to write them as fractions. So we have 5 and 6/10, but remember, we want to write it improper first. So we could actually write this as 56/10, and we're dividing by 1/10. And if we can remember, we're going to turn our division equation. Let me scroll down a little bit so I can, oh, there's not another page here. Let me add another page down there so we can have some space. There we go. All right, so we have, let me get that erased off so you're not confused on I think it was from the other side. Okay. All right, so we're going to, remember our first fraction, what we start out with stays the same. Divide becomes its inverse, which is multiplication. Remember, they have a relationship, and this becomes its reciprocal. So 1/10 becomes 10 over 1. And the reason why I love writing these division as fractions is because we can multiply and divide by powers of tens. I even have people start to simplify here. We can divide by 10, and we end up with 56, over 1 basically, but I'll show you that here in a second. So we have 50. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. That came out of nowhere. I think I was pressing the button down. So we have 56 times the power of 10. And so if you could remember back whenever we reviewed Module 1, 56, shifting one place value, 1 power of 10 is becoming greater to those greater place values. We end up with 560. And then 10 times 1 is 10. And then again, now we have 560 divided by 10. So if I have 560 and I'm dividing by a power of 10, my digits are going to shift to a less place value, 1 place. So 560 divided by a power of 10 would just be 56. So this answer is 56. Okay? All right, let's try another one. Let's see if you can do one. Why don't you try the second one? So remember to write 2 and 3/10 as an improper fraction. Don't, if you write it as a mixed number, you're going to have to turn it into an improper fraction. But we learned how to write decimals as improper fractions. So that's what I want you to do. I want you to write 2 and 3/10 as an improper fraction. If you need an example, I'll leave this up. 5 and 6/10 is written as 56/10. So 2 and 3/10 will be written as 23/10. And this time we're not dividing by 1/10, we're dividing by 100th. That's why I like these two problems right here, because they're dividing by powers of 10. All right, let's rewrite. So we have 23/10 stays. We're going to use that multiplication family. Division becomes its inverse, and this fraction becomes its reciprocal. And then we have 23 times 100, which is 2 powers of 10. So your digits are shifting 2 place values. Or we also learned in Module 2, 23 times 1 is 23. Oh, sorry. And then how many powers of 10s do we have? We have 2. And if we shifted I'm sorry about that. If we shifted those digits, the 2 would have moved to the thousands place, And the 3 would have moved to the hundreds. We would have had to have filled in 2 zeros. And 10 times 1 is 10. And now look what we have again. We have 2,300. So imagine that in the place value chart. And we're dividing by our power of 10. So our digits are shifting one place value to a less place value. So the 2's in the thousands, it would shift to the hundreds place. So our answer would be 230. Okay, pretty cool, huh? Now, the next two are a little different because they don't divide by powers of tens, okay? So we're going to use the same strategy, though. We're going to write as fractions. So we have, well, how can we write this in proper? Who can remember? So we have 5 and 6 tenths written as 56 tenths. We have 2 and 3 tenths written as 23 tenths. What would this be? Yes, very good. 15 tenths divided by 3 tenths. And that one doesn't need to be, it's already nice and pretty for you. Okay, same thing. Keep it the same. 15 tenths. Division becomes its inverse. And our second fraction becomes its reciprocal. And now something that people in my class did, I will show you something. You can always simplify before you begin. I want to show you this. This is really cool. Something that my class liked to do a whole lot, but it kind of saved them time. That's a 3, by the way. Sorry about that. You're letting the screen be getting crazy. Okay, so we can simplify these, but you have to divide the numerator and denominator by the same number. So I can divide 10 and 10 both by 10, which would give me ones. I can also divide 3 and 15 both by 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1, and 15 divided by 3 is 5. And look what I end up with. 5 times 1 is 5 over 1 times 1, which is 1. What's 5 divided by 1? Yes, 5. And the other cool part about that is, guys, if you ended up doing 15, if you didn't do any of this right here, and you did 15 times 10, which is 150, and you did 10 times 3, which is 30. If I write in a division box, guys, 150 divided by 30, it equals 5. So you end up getting the same answer. It just helps alleviating long division and things like that. So just a future note to self. All right, let's do our last one. So again, pause the video, see if you can do 14 and 4/4 divided by 6/10. Our last one. You guys can do it. Remember, write 14 and 4/10 as an improper fraction first, so you don't have extra work to do. All right, so now that you've tried that, I'm going to do our last one for us, and we'll be all done. You'll be able to rock out your Friday and your weekend. So we have, instead of saying 14 and 4/10 and write as a mixed number, we're going to write as an improper fraction, 144 tenths, and then divided by 6/10. Okay, and then, so we know 144 tenths keeps its value, division becomes its inverse, and our 6/10 becomes its reciprocal. Okay, remember, multiplication and division have a relationship. Okay, all right. So again, I'm going to tell you to do it again because it's just easier. So if we did 144 times 10, numerator times numerator, 10, at least you get rid of your powers of 10. 10 times 6, I know that's not very pretty, and I'm going to scroll down just a little bit for you. Okay, and so what we're going to do is we're going to simplify. At least, if you don't know these two, that's okay. I would at least simplify your tens. 10 divided by 10 is 1, and 10 divided by 10 is 1. So now you have 144 times 1, and 1 times 6, which is 6. And now, instead of having all those zeros involved, we can divide 144 divided by 6. And then we'll see what we get. So how many times is 6 going to 14? 2 times. What's it get us to? 12, right. And then subtract. 6 goes into 24 4 times because it gets us to actually 24 on the dot. And so we end up with 24. So that answer is 24, okay? Up here is 24. And this was 5. All right. So those of you at home, you have your paper copy. Those of you in Google Classroom, you have Google Form. Come back to this video if you're struggling, guys. try a few on your own. Have a parent or a guardian or grandma or Uncle Joe, whoever you live with, or a sibling to give you a division problem simple like these that you can solve and practice with, okay? All right, happy Friday. I hope you have a great weekend. I'm very proud of your hard work this week. Keep pushing through and get finished for today. Have a great weekend, guys. Bye.